Just as a first introduction, SettleMint is a company that we got started back in 2016. And we basically provide let's say, blockchain agnostic middleware solution for enterprise to use and to adopt blockchain technologies rather rapidly, much more rapidly than they would normally do if they have an internal team that's doing R&D work to figure out how this stuff works. We provide them, instead of that effort, we provide them with API connections that they can integrate quite quickly. That's SettleMint as background. Just we've got about 15 people working there. And Data Broker is what I'm going to talk about today. Data Broker is tying in with some of the themes that I heard earlier. It's not about drones, but it is about data, and also about the data monetization side of things. So if you look at Data Broker, just a short introduction, I think this is one of the advisors for this platform. It's a gentleman named Patrick Byrne. He's the CEO of a company called Overstock.com. Overstock is an online retailer. And yeah, basically when I demoed this platform back in, it was the first version of it back in January of 2017, he was quite impressed by it. And he said basically what we've done at Overstock for physical goods, Data Broker will do for data. So that's Patrick. If everyone knows his background, he's kind of an early adopter of Bitcoin as well. It was one of the first publicly traded companies to start accepting Bitcoin. So what exactly is this thing, and what did he get excited about? We'll take a short video to introduce it. Oh, do we have audio? I hope so.
In 2019, there will be 33 billion sensors all around the world, capturing all sorts of data. All this data goes through a gateway operator into data silos, where it gets locked away after it's served its purpose. All $600 billion worth per year. But imagine a world where you can search and buy any amount of data you need from all over the world. By using a decentralized network named Ethereum, in combination with smart contracts, we connect buyers and sellers of data from all over the world. Sounds amazing, you'd say? Well, it is. And what's even better, this marketplace already exists. Join us now at Data Broker DAO, the global market for local data.
Okay, so just a short intro video to explain in about half a minute, more than I can explain in 10 minutes, so that'll cut us some time towards the end of the night. So just to look a little bit further into the market for IoT sensors and how big is that. Last year it reached about $600 billion US. That's how much companies are spending every year to purchase sensors, to install them, and for the software packages that they have to understand what's happening with the data, and then of course to maintain those sensors. So this is already a $600 billion per year business. It's expected to grow to about 1.2 trillion within the next 3 years. So what you see is in terms of that's how much money is being spent, and how much is that data worth? Well, we made a bit of an assumption because we wanted to see how much value could you unleash for society if you were able to create access to this data that's just locked away in data warehouses. So we said basically any investment that most companies make, if it doesn't have shorter than a 2-year payback period, they're not going to make the investment. So if they're spending 600 billion, our assumption is that value the value of that for the business is at least 300 billion. And that's so expected to grow over the next couple of years as well, quite dramatically. Just one other thing. On the airport over here, I came across a sign from PwC stating that 73% of companies are investing in IoT intelligence and sensors today. But what kind of data are they looking at, and what sort of things? Because a lot of the questions about GDPR and how does this fit with that. Essentially, when you look at the types of data that are coming off of these sensors, predominantly it's environmental data. It's things about the air quality, it's about the wind, the rain, the barometric pressure. It's about what's happening on the roads, it's traffic flows and so forth. And it's industrial IoT data. So more than 90% of the data that's actually being created today has nothing to do with what's happening on your Fitbit. If you're looking at wearable technologies, it's nothing to do with that. It's nothing to do about smart home devices when your lights are turning on and off and things like that. It's really about environmental and industrial data. So personal data is actually less than 10% of the current market for sensors. So that's nice. That's the market for, let's say, primary users of the data, the owners of those sensors. But there is already, of course, a big market for data acquisition, repackaging, enriching, aggregating, for example, and selling that data on. That today is about a $150 billion per year business, with about 5,000 companies globally that are focused on procuring data, enriching it, and selling it on for the insights that they're able to tease out of it for their interested clients. So already a very large industry that's focused around getting value out of data, and that's without access to all that data from the sensors. So what kind of sectors or industries are we talking about? Well, basically, put smart in front of anything, and you've got an industry that's forming right now. So smart cities, smart transportation, smart agriculture. I love the agricultural cases. I'll just do one anecdotal story. But our company's based in Belgium, and in Belgium, about 10% of the farmers are techie. So the agricultural sector is still pretty big, but you've got 10% of the farmers that have deployed a network of sensors that's measuring throughout their farm, the wind, the rain, the barometric pressure, the pH level in the soil. It's telling them how often their cows are walking around and all kinds of stuff like that. Some of them have drones. So some of them do have the drones flying around, maybe checking for weed, I think we heard earlier. So you have all these farmers that are spending money on getting intelligence, so they're not driving around on a tractor. They're managing their farm from their office and having a very, let's say, pointed approach to how they're developing and increasing the yield of their farm. And their targets are usually between 3 to 5% increase in yield per year. So they're spending all this money to get this intelligence, and the question is, who's interested in their data? Well, when looking at the agricultural case, if you have things like the wind, the rain, the barometric pressure, and you've got 10% of the farmers, that's 1,500 data points that are collecting this data around the country. Well, that's more granular than the National Weather Service. So it's quite interesting who wants to buy that data. Well, TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, students that are studying environmental factors as well. And about for example, the pH level in the soil, well, who wants that? Well, fertilizer companies would love to be able to tailor an offer specific to a farm even, to be able to speed up the process and conversion for them. So there's all these different sectors smart in front of anything, and you've got a sector that's interested in this data, and we'll be generating more and more of this data as the years go on. So then, if you look at the data, based on the assumptions we make about the value of the data for the primary users, and the question next, if you're creating a marketplace to access this data, is how much is that data worth to the rest of the world? So we did some basic calculations there. Again, so from the earlier slides, being close to 450 billion a year for the primary users. And we had a group, actually we did a study with a university in Belgium called Bolero. They have a master's program, and they look for case studies that they can look into. So back in March of 2017, we had the platform already built, and I engaged them to do a go-to-market plan for Data Broker. So they did a lot of research, and they said, based on the types of sensors that are out there, you can expect that 1 in 10 will be interesting for others to buy. And those ones that are interesting, at least 1 to 3 people will buy it. So applying these simple calculations, you come to a value for a secondary market for this data that will be between 135 and 450 billion euros per year in the very near future. Potential value, so potential value of this market. So it's something that doesn't exist today. There are some open data initiatives. And the issue that I think that what holds them back a bit is essentially you create a system that misses incentives. If I'm a company with sensors and I'm asked to give that data for free, well, that's maybe a nice thing to do. Other researchers can use it and so forth. But if something goes wrong with my sensor and I'm not interested in maintaining it, and somebody starts calling me to say, hey, fix your sensor, well, sorry, there's no economic incentive to sustain these kind of initiatives. So what are some of the challenges with talking about the sensor market? And specifically, I want to talk about smart city initiatives. You have basically, and one of the aspects of this platform that I really like is that it essentially democratizes access to data that any entrepreneur can use in order to build the next great thing. If they're doing something with, I told myself before I got up here, I'm not going to use the word AI because that would be annoying. But at any rate, if you have somebody who has a great algorithm but doesn't have the data, so I'll just use the algorithm instead. All right, then what he's got here is access to it. So all of these initiatives at PhDs that are studying, they've come up with a great new model on how to change or how to have an impact on climate change, but yeah, they don't have access to the data. Well, it's out there. There are already 9 billion sensors out there, again, going to 32 billion within the next 3 to 4 years. So the data is either out there now or will be very soon. And the cost of acquiring that data with a marketplace like this is obviously quite affordable. The alternative, and back to the smart city example, is that what is the smart city driven on? It's driven on data. That's the primary thing that's needed in order to make it work. But of course, to deploy a network of sensors, that's a huge sunk cost. So if you can imagine, there are not many governments in the world that are willing to make the upfront investment, because it's a massive sunk cost that if they're giving the data away, there's no economic model behind it. The second thing is, of course, the data silos. So what data broker essentially does is it breaks down both of those. So instead of a sunk cost, what we're presenting is the opportunity to turn that sunk cost into a revenue stream. So the investment in improving the quality of life in the city can be centered around not just the sunk cost that we have to budget for, but actually in 2 to 3 years we'll recoup the cost, and then it actually starts making money, which is a really interesting proposition for a lot of smart city initiatives. All right. And I mentioned the first version of the platform. So we had that ready, as I said, in January of 2017. I've spent the year of 2017, quite a lot of my time, on the road with talking to end users of the platform, actually, different stakeholders that are involved in making such a platform work. So I've met with probably 15 different telcos, big national level telcos that are looking that own, let's say, own or lease the networks of connectivity that are needed, that the sensor data is flowing across. So whether they have, if anyone's in the IoT space, I'll say a few things, but I'll make it short. But they may be using a combination of their GSM network, their GPRS network, 3G, for example, for SIM-based sensors. They may have a license for LoRa. Some of them are usually not Sigfox, that's another operator, but you have all of these infrastructure providers that are out there. They're connecting all these 9 billion devices. So we bring them into the story and we say, look, we've got a proposition for you. We're going to, essentially for the telco, there's no, or the gateway operator, there's no further infrastructure cost. Their infrastructure is already out there. So essentially what it is a 2 to 3 day exercise to integrate, make an integration point with the gateway, and that gives access immediately to, in the case of the one where we've done an integration test, that gives access to 2 million sensors in one integration. Instead of trying to go right to the end sensors, you've automatically got the platform populated with 2 million sensors. Talking to a lot of so telcos, sensor manufacturers, sensor owners, and so the whole ecosystem around it. And what we've said to the sensor owners, all right, there is a money part here, it's monetization. 80% of the revenue goes back to you, 10% goes to the gateway operator, and 10% is retained by the platform. So it's a revenue sharing model that works between the three key stakeholders in there. Then last thing, then of course one of the, and I'll get to our alliance that we have formed now, but one of the other things that we got quite often as a question is how do you secure or how do you make sure that the data quality is good? Because that's a big problem in the IoT space. Well, what we do there is there's a staking process. So if I'm a sensor owner that's connected to it, I stake my tokens against the quality of my data. So the more I stake, the higher in rankings I come and so forth. So there's what they call a token curated registry that manages that process. But so essentially what we're doing there is saying that if you're a sensor owner putting your sensor data on the platform, well, put your DTX where your sensor is, stand behind it, prove the quality of it, and as a result, you'll get higher rankings on search results. So about the alliance, so quite often there's only, I think, one name that most people would recognize, but the other ones are some of those infrastructure players in this space that are really quite interesting. So you've got the one in the middle, I guess most people will know, but if I take, and these are not really our core target, they're nice names, it makes everybody excited, but this one up here, Option, I'll just show you what they do because it's really quite interesting if I can make that happen. So these guys are actually providing hardware in this ecosystem that is, and I'll just go to who are the operators that they have. So if you look at what, we're not trying to put all these kind of names and say these are people we're working with. Definitely not. We're working with the companies that provide them with hardware. Now I've done it. Where is that? It's PowerPoint, right? Sorry? Right. Okay. I don't see the PowerPoint tab. Ah, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, there we are. Back to that. Other alliances that we're formed, or let's say alliances that we're becoming members of as data broker, this AIoTI. This is an association that's created by the European Union. So it's at a European Union level. They have about 180 companies that are in that. They have a number of working groups looking at topics that are interesting in the IoT space. And we're bringing another element to that story, which is data monetization and blockchain technologies. Our team behind it, I won't go into too many details. My background is banking, primarily investment banking. Was one of those guys inside of a bank that runs around with a specialist hat for blockchain technologies, trying to find problems that need a solution, that type of thing. Get your list of use cases and then try to build something to prove that you can actually do it with a blockchain. That was my entry into the blockchain space. As I said, my co-founder, we formed a SettleMint in 2016. Data Broker has been around since January of 2017 was the first version of it. Roderick is the CTO. He's got a very straight, let's say, IT background, CTO of his previous company. And when I wasn't able to get anybody internally to build anything, because nobody had the capability in-house, the developers, I had to outsource the work. And Roderick's company is the one that I outsourced to, so we decided to start our company to provide access to blockchain technologies in a broader sense. We've got devs in the team, they're all mentioned there. Sorry. I mentioned at the beginning about Patrick and who he is. Other people that are on the advisory board, these guys are quite close, they know each other very well. But Jonathan is the head of Medici Ventures, so it's a blockchain-focused VC. Richard Castelline is in the publishing business, and Julian is an innovation manager at the largest telco in Belgium. He focuses on IoT and blockchain within this telco. So that's our team, and I said I'd keep it shorter than half an hour. I think I've managed.